Hello everybody, welcome back to the next segment of our basement bar build. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, if you could hit those like and subscribe buttons, help me keep fresh content coming to you. Enjoy! So we're going to throw out a quick safety disclaimer here. This video is for entertainment purposes only, and always use caution when doing construction and working around electricity. Always wear your proper personal protective equipment and consult local building codes before doing any work. If you're not allowed to perform the scope of the work or it exceeds your abilities, consult the applicable contractor or electrician. Use caution when working around electricity and ensure circuit breakers are turned off at the panel. Hi everybody, we're on day one of our basement bar build here. We're going to start doing some demo, taking walls down and such, getting this space ready for the bar build. As you can see here, the customer hasn't quite been able to clear everything out that we had wanted to. No big deal, we still have some time. We're not going to quite start demoing here yet. We're going to work on this side space that we'll get to in a minute. Looking around here, we can see the TV. We're going to wall mount that a little bit later in the project. Moving on here into the sides hallway space, we're going to incorporate this into the bar. We can see this kind of craft area they had. It's got some upper cabinets, and it's got some lower shelves in the counter space. This part over here, we spoke with the customer. This is a work in progress. It's kind of a fluid thing as we go here once we get the floor space mapped out. But we think this space here is going to actually be a closet. And then this space here, we're going to make into the open concept design for the bar. But looking in here, one way or another we need to demo this. So we had spoken with the customer. We're going to repurpose this upper cabinet and lower cabinet countertop space for another part in the house. As we went through here and we start to demo things, just before the video, we see we have the under cabinet lights here. You'll see there's actually 120 power going into those. So what we need to do is find the breaker that's feeding those, cut that breaker, find the switch source, which I'm pretty confident is going to be right here. And then we'll find the feeder wire that's going into that. We'll cap that off and we'll be able to do the demo here and not worry about the wiring. Hit these switches. That turns on both the overhead light and the under cabinet lights. That one doesn't because, like I said, I got overzealous, started doing some work, there's no bulb in there, but as you can see here, these switches are what control the lights. So what we'll do is we'll find the breaker that controls these, we'll hit that off so that we don't get zapped. I'll take this apart and we'll find the feeder wire that's feeding the lights, both the overhead and the under cabinet, and we'll disconnect that. And then we'll be able to go ahead and isolate these wires here on the lights and go ahead and be able to take those out safely. So if you notice, I'm working in a live electric box here. This can be very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, and if you touch one of those terminals on the switches, they will shock you. So if you're not comfortable in doing this or don't know how, turn off the breaker. Okay, so if we look close here, we have the red wire coming off of this switch and the bottom black wire coming off of this switch going to the rest of these circuits right here. So I'm looking at this outlet right here. When we flip this one on, it hits our overhead light. When we flip it off, it takes the light off. So that tells me that this switch right here controls that light. With this one right here, when we look at the bottom wire, coming out of this switch, I know it's hard to trace the wires here, and it goes into this cluster. When the switch is off, and also our under cabinet lights are off, this cluster here is dead. When we turn that on, under cabinet lights go on, and this wire nut cluster here is hot. That tells me this switch here controls the under cabinet lights. So the theme here is what's feeding both of these switches, and the hot is right here. These wires are always hot, and this is the wire that's feeding the entire circuit. So once I get rid of this wire nut here, I can disconnect all of these. This will be my hot feed that controls the entire circuit in this switch box. I'll cap that off and we'll be able to remove all these. And for heck's sake, we'll test these just beforehand to make sure that they're hot now and that they're not hot later when we go to remove them. Okay, so to double check this, we will just go ahead and give this a run with the meter just to make sure this is actually our hot wire and that these are cold. But I'm going to go ahead and re-energize the circuit. If you remember from when we first initially traced these, this is the hot that comes in and feeds both lights, both the under cabinet lights and that one overhead spotlight. So by isolating this and capping that off, we're going to be good to go to put these back in the box, discontinue and demo everything else. Again, we will double check just that this is the hot wire, that these are going to be cold with no voltage coming through them. And just to be sure, because we're going to actually be cutting wires here, I'm actually going to put these on a multimeter and measure the voltage on them so that we don't zap ourselves. It's not so much that we don't zap ourselves, because I've been whacked a time or two before. It's that we don't leave a open live wire here. Okay, so what we've done here is we've isolated our wires. We've identified this is the feeder wire that's coming in that feeds both lights. We've taken the switches out of that, and this is our feeder wire that's going to be isolated from the rest, and it's not going to power anything else. Here we have our traveler wires that go to our switches. So this one was for the spotlight, this is for those under cabinet lights. That's why there's 3 of them in there, because we have 3 of the under cabinet lights. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a process called back probing these with our multimeter. Sorry, our work light's fading out on us there. We're going to back probe these with our multimeter just to show that there is actually voltage coming through this, that there was no voltage on these, to make sure that we have everything right. These non-contact testers, they generally work very good. They're right about 98 times out of 100. So when we're going to be going cutting wires doing our demo here, I want to make sure that we're 100 times out of 100, and we'll verify that with an actual multimeter. So you can see we have our multimeter setting here. It's set up to volts alternating current, and we're just going to do a process called back probing to go into our live wire and our cold wires to make sure we're good here. So we're going to go from our live wire to the ground. That shows about 123 volts. That's within tolerance. We're good there. That verifies that's our hot wire. We have traveler wire 1. That's showing nominal voltage. You're always going to get ancillary voltage like that in the lines. That's normal. Same thing with traveler wires 2. We have our ancillary nominal voltage. We're good to go. So I'm confident at this point here that we've isolated our right feeder wire. We'll really verify that our wire nut's on there. We'll tuck all these back in, and now we're good to demo everything. We're good to start cutting those lights out. And we're good to take our cabinets down, and we'll go from there. So we've done some demo work, removed some of the old framing, removed some wiring, removed a little bit of carpet. We had some off-camera work, the battery died. If you look over here, you can see we rerouted a little bit of wiring, did a little bit of framing. One of the walls we weren't happy with where it was, so we're going to move it. If we look over here, you can see we have some holes in the wall. We had some wiring from under cabinet lights that was over here, so we actually really wanted to make sure we got rid of those and didn't have any hot wires in the wall that we missed. So we traced every wire. There was a junction box right here. Traced all the wires to that. Actually took that box out and took the wires out where it was feeding those under cabinet lights. We did leave this light in. We're probably going to replace that with a pot light or some sort of specialty light. And then that is actually the hot feed that will feed the light and goes down to the switch leg right here. So we'll work on that as the video progresses. We did have some layout changes. Initially when we talked to the customer, the bar was going to go right here in this area here. You can see we have some of our epoxy stack there. We got a good deal on it, so we stocked up. Over here, what we're actually going to do is we're going to frame and build a closet in this area here. So as we're looking, back the camera up a little bit. As we're looking, this area right here is going to be a storage closet. So we'll frame that in, we'll figure out our dimensions on the doors, we'll get those in. I'll show you how we do that, how we frame those walls, how we get the door roughed in, and how we anchor the framing to the floor and the ceiling. And when we do the floor, I'll show you how I do the ram sets and how we do just the concrete anchors to really make sure that's solid in there. We'll do some sort of wiring based off of this circuit here. We'll get a closet light up in there. We'll do a switch leg for it. We'll show you all that on camera. If you look over here, what we're going to work on next is we actually have what's called some spalling in the floor. And this is caused from those concrete anchors. That one's pretty significant. So what we want to do is we want to get some concrete filler in those and get that as flat as possible. It's probably not that big of a deal with the flooring. We'd probably never know it was there. But when I do the flooring, I want to have as flat of a surface as possible. So some of this is unavoidable, some of it was from our experiment. So if we look along the lines here, that's where the old concrete anchors were in. So whenever you blast those in, you know, there's always going to be some sort of little bit of demolition that goes with the concrete along with it. It's going to chip some of that. Generally, it's not that big of a deal because the framing is there and the framing is keeping it all compressed. But if we look here, what we actually did here on these was we did a demo of our bar with the sizing and the framing, and I just threw a couple of ram sets in just to see which option was going to be more stable. I did two different designs, so that's left over from that. And then this wall right here, we actually had along this line, and then we changed our layout at the last minute. The initial design was to have the bar over here against this wall. You can see I got the tape for some measurement layout, some rough sketching on where things would go. We did some cardboard templates on the life-size layout of the bar, and neither myself or the customer really liked it. It just didn't really flow. You know, initially we were going to have the couch right here where I'm standing watching the TV here, bar area here, and just kind of an open area here, maybe a game table, a poker table. And once we looked back and started thinking about it, we really thought this would be the better area for the bar. So we could do the bar in an L shape right here, have a little alcove area right there. That'll be some back bar, some storage, probably some cabinet space for the AV equipment. So we looked over here. We'd initially put these walls in off of camera just to kind of get the walls framed out. So we figured if we just move this wall back a little bit, which is not finally in place yet, I'll show you how we ram set and concrete anchor that in. This would be a good enough area for the bar. So we're going to proceed with that. So our next step in the build here is going to be to frame in this closet and get the wiring done for that, and then we'll work on framing in the rest of the bar, work on the wiring for that. But before I do that quick, I do just want to fix this spalling in the concrete. Again, it would probably be fine with the flooring we're going to do over it, but I want as flat a surface as possible. You never know what we might change in the future. So I'll show you how we're going to do that with some concrete patch and some bonding primer. So I apologize, I accidentally deleted the video that explains what I was doing there, so I'll just do a voiceover and get it to you that way. What I'm doing is I'm just cleaning out those spalling spots, making sure they're free of any loose debris. Some of them actually still had the old nails in them, so So I just took a chisel and a drilling hammer and just worked them back side to side. Eventually they break free. Going to vacuum everything out, make sure they're as clean as possible before we do that concrete patch in there. Always remember to read the manufacturer instructions on the product. This one's actually a little bit different from the instructions than what I'm used to using. So this says to actually mix the fortifying primer with some of the concrete. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. It says just to mix a little bit, enough so it forms like a paint-like consistency. So I've already got the primer in here. We'll go ahead and mix some concrete in, and then we'll get to work. Remember, always get that mask on, even if it's a little bit. So again, I apologize. I accidentally deleted the video segment that narrates what I'm doing here, so I'll just do it in a voiceover. You have two parts to your concrete patch when you're filling those spalling spots. First one is going to be the actual concrete. That's going to be the volume that fills that open hole. The other is going to be your bonding primer that preps the surface and lets the new concrete patch adhere to the old existing concrete. So just follow the manufacturer's instructions on both as far as how to use them and how to mix the products, and you're not going to have a problem. One of the things I do talk about that I missed is a process called slaking, which essentially means you let the concrete sit for 5 minutes after you mix it. It just lets any of those unmixed particles that might be a little bit dry absorb any of the water. One last thing I'll talk about in this segment is always make sure you're wearing a good mask whenever you're mixing concrete or anything with dust for that matter. You know, it could be sheetrock, joint compound, anything like that. Make sure you always wear a mask because you have those particles that get airborne, and once you breathe those in, they pretty much never leave your lungs and you're stuck with them forever, so be safe. Okay, so we're mixed to that paint-like consistency that the directions said. That actually took a lot more mix than I thought it would, so we're going to go ahead and let this get a 5-minute sit as well, same thing we did with that concrete patch, just to go ahead and make sure all the dry particles absorb the moisture. I'm not really too concerned about my concrete setting up too fast on me. We did mix it a few minutes ago, but we got a 30-minute work time. We should be well under that by the time this sits and by the time we get the patch in. I'll see you in a few. So everything is good and mixed here. Just going to go ahead and get our foam brush. We're going to get some of that bonding primer mixture on there. And just go ahead and blot this into the hole. And really you just want to kind of cover and make sure that primer is on anywhere you want that concrete patch to stick to. We'll do this in batches, about as much as I can do without having to move my knee pad and do another one. And the reason we're doing this is to make sure that our patch gets a nice, strong bond to the floor that has that spalling on it. We want to go ahead and get that in there and just have it flake out. Again, it's not really going to matter too much. We're going to have that compression protection because we're probably going to do some sort of vinyl tile or vinyl plank floor over this. But we want our bonds to be as strong as possible. And while that's still wet, we can get some of our patching in there. Normally for bigger spots you would take a masonry trowel and kind of goop this out of here and fill it in and smooth it out. But these are smaller, so we can just take it right out of our mixing towel. Here we have our taping knife. We're just going to smooth this out. This is where that trowel's kind of nice because you can just scoop it right up. We're going to be good here. Work it back and forth a couple different ways, almost kind of like you're grouting. Take it in from different angles. Make sure the hole's completely filled. The extra that's around the edges, just kind of scrape it into a pile like this. That stuff's not going to cure, that's not going to harden. Even if it did, it doesn't really have anything to harden to. so we can always scrape that up and fix it later. These are some pretty big divots here, so we'll see how this dries. It might sink down a little bit when some of that moisture evaporates. We may have to mix up a second batch, maybe do that one a little more runny, almost kind of like you're doing like a skim coat on drywall or a top coat and smooth it over, but we'll see how it looks when we're done. So we let this sit. Our concrete fill has hardened and cured. We're just going to go on and just smooth this out. We're going to clean up any rough edges or any patch that we spilled that dripped on the floor. Just take a putty knife, scraper, taping knife, anything of the sort, and just go over where you filled those spalling spots and just give that a scrape. Smooth everything over, make sure it's level with the surface. And that's it. You're good to go. We'll hit that with all the spots. We'll sweep, we'll vacuum, we'll move on to the next thing. So we're at this point in our build where we're going to start working on this area with the closet. So we talked to the customer, and what they want is a 24-inch deep closet. We went over a few different options. We went through some different examples they had in their house. Ultimately, they wanted something 24 inches deep. So when we started with the layout of their closet, we did a little bit of math. 24 inches for the depth of the closet, finished. 1/2 inch for drywall on the inside, and then 3.5 for framing. Again, we're going to have a 1/2 inch of drywall on the outside, but that doesn't matter right now during our framing layout. So we came to that conclusion at 28 inches. Remember, 24, 1/2, 3.5. And we went to each corner where the closet's going to be. So here we have our already established corner, measured out 28 from that. We figured out how wide we're going to want our closet. We looked at this window and this existing bulkhead right here. We figured out an endpoint, measured out that endpoint, and we went our 28 from there. From there I just took my level, have a straight edge, drew a straight line out. From there I took my framing square right to the edge of where we wanted this, which I think ended up being 54 inches, but not important right now. Just took my framing square, lined it up on this line right here, our initial 28-inch line, and just drew another line in. So ordinarily, if the sheetrock was staying, we would be ready to start framing our wall. But we have some issues with the sheetrock, which I'm going to get into right now. So when you're planning your own project, or when you're talking to your customers, you have to anticipate potential snags and where things may go wrong. And maybe sometimes in the middle of a project you start doing things and it's like, oof, that's not going to look right, we should do something else. And this is one of those cases, and I anticipated it, and I promised the customer I would try to avoid it, but it may not be possible, and at this point it's not possible. And I'll get to the punchline here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rip all this drywall out. Believe me, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do the extra work. I don't want to deal with the dust. I don't want to deal with replacing the trim and all that there. But let me tell you what my level of thinking is. We're going to be building a closet, and it's going to end right here. If we were doing this from the start, we would work this so it visually looks good. But in order to be able to tape into here and join our sheetrock, get our joint compound in, get our tape in, we have to bring this back from the bulkhead a little bit. The problem with doing that is the stud runs right here. So in order for me to get framing into here, I have to open this part of the wall up and put blocking in to get my framing in and to drill my sheetrock on each side in. So that means I have sheetrock work here and sheetrock work here. We already have these open spaces here. Remember, we had that wiring that we wanted to discontinue. So we have the open drywall that would have to be patched, and I have an open vapor barrier. So as we progress forward here, looking at all the problems we have here with the sheetrock, if you look at these holes right here that I made to discontinue the wiring and make sure we didn't have any live wires, each time I had to cut the vapor barrier. Now if there was just a few holes and we didn't have anything else going on, I would say I'll just use foil tape, we'll tape that, we'll maintain the vapor barrier in place. But now we have to go ahead and open up this section of the wall. We have to add the blocking to get this part of the wall in and attach that. That's going to be a lot to try and repair in the vapor barrier. I could, But couple that with, we have all these holes in the wall that we made to track and discontinue the wiring. We have this open space in the bottom of the wall here. When we started doing our demo, I don't remember if it was on video or not, but when I pulled one of the cabinets, it was a really rainy day, and there was actually some water seeping underneath. So I did an inspection hole there just to go ahead and see where that may be coming from and see how far the damage was. Didn't end up being a big deal, it was just a little bit of residual water. It's probably been going on for years. But in looking at all of that, it's really not worth it to try and patch all these different holes, retape these open spots of the vapor barrier when it's just not going to look right. You know what I mean? We're going to have a patch here, patch there. So if we just had this patch, if we just had those patches, probably not an issue, right? But now we have a whole open area here from where we're going to add my blocking. That's got to get skimmed over and that's got to get patched. We have this bottom area. And now when we pan over here, now when we look over here, again, we have these holes here from working on the electric and getting rid of those wires. We have an outlet here we're going to discontinue. We have two other ones down the wall that we're going to discontinue and move a little bit lower. That's more patchwork. We have this full open cavity. And when we do our AV and we install our subwoofers, what we're actually going to do, you'll see it later on in the video, they're actually in-wall subwoofers. And they go almost from the top of the wall to the bottom, and they need an entire stud cavity. So when we install those subwoofers, we're going to open up the entire wall cavity, install everything, wire everything, and sheetrock back over it. So now we have open wall cavity here for sheetrock for the subwoofer. Open wall cavity here from demo. I'm looking at them quick. We've got about 12 open spaces that we would have to sheetrock and patch. And we're not just talking little dime holes. Right? We're talking big 6, 7, 8-inch holes. So at the end of the day, it's going to be easier for me to go ahead and just leave everything as is and go to my taper when after I get the sheetrock and say to my taper, hey man, go ahead and patch everything. At the end of the day, no matter how good your taper is, you're never going to be able to make that look perfect. Again, the closet, we don't care. But when we start talking the wall right here, all right, we want that to look good because this is going to be one of the focal points. We have the TV right here. We don't want this looking wavy. We don't want it looking like there's just been 20 patches in there because that's exactly what it's going to be. So it's best just to take this sheetrock out and start over. Again, not something that I want to do, but at the end of the day, it's going to look better and it's going to be the most quality product. So when we're talking all these things with the wall, right, we have to open up an entire cavity here to install our subwoofer. Then we have to re-sheetrock back over that. We have this area here that we have to mend back in and try and mesh a piece in there and tape over it. We have the 3 outlets along the way that we're going to have to discontinue. That's going to be more inspection holes. That's going to be more work back and forth. We have all of our other inspection holes and our working holes that we did to take the wires out. And then we have that cavity we're going to have to open up to add our blocking in to add the wall. At the end of the day, that's just way too much patchwork. Right? It's going to spend the taper, once I sheetrock this, I'm going to subcontract in a taper. It's going to take him 4 times as long to tape that. It's going to cost the customer more in the end than if we would just go ahead and discontinue all this sheetrock, demo it out, put new stuff in, and start fresh. And at the end of the day, it's going to look a lot better. Even the best taper, the best ones I work with, they're not going to be able to take all these holes and mesh them together and make it look like one seamless wall like nothing ever happened. Different shades of light, different times of day, depending where you're standing in the room, you're always going to see a little bit of waviness in the wall. So I'd rather just tear it out, put new stuff in. At the end of the day, it's going to take us a little bit longer, but it's going to save the customer money, and more importantly, it's going to look better in the end. Hey everybody, thank you for watching. As always, if you could hit those like and subscribe buttons, and we'll catch you next time. Hopefully you're good to watch the next video in the series, and we'll link that above. Until next time, goodbye.